Welcome back to the exciting video, and what we're doing today is we are going to do a deep dive into the C major scale and chord. So what do I mean a deep dive? Well, a while back I kind of started this thing for guitar players, for new guitar players, intermediate guitar players. And I gotta admit, I kind of drifted off of it for a little bit because, when you're doing a YouTube channel, other things kind of pop up and you're like, oh my God, I need to go ahead and get this done. And sometimes you'll get a little sidetracked and things will wane off. Well, I finally decided to jump back into this and go ahead and complete this thing out. And part of it is we're going to be doing deep dives into chords and scales. Now, if you're a beginner guitar player, this is going to be imperative for you to watch, learn, and understand. If you're an intermediate guitar player, chances are you're going to know the bulk of this material, but there's some pretty cool parts of it that you may not know. And I know a lot of the intermediate guitar players, for instance, in this, what we're getting ready to do here, I'll go up and say, hey man, play a B diminished, and they can't. They have no idea what it is because they're chords they've never used before, which is a shame because diminished chords are beautiful, beautiful things. More on that in a minute. And so we're going to be covering all the chords. Now, not in this one. This one is just over the C major scale, the positions, and the chords of the C major scale. That is it. Then I will continue on and I'll do, C, D, E, F, G, so on and so on and so on. Probably not going to do the minors for the obvious reason, because in this I will be mentioning that each scale has a relative minor, and the relative minor is obviously the same exact thing as the major. It just starts on the 6th degree. But all the chords are all the same besides that. If you start a chord on its root, on its major, usually it has a very happy sound to it. If you start it on its 6th degree, the minor, it usually has a much more sad, a melancholy sound to it. But the chords are always the same. It just resolves back to a different tonal center. More on that later. So, let's get started on this. So the first thing we're going to talk about, C major scale. Now the C major scale, the diatonic C major scale, is comprised of 7 notes. And I've gone over this before, and if you need a refresher on the major scale, I have a video on my channel that kind of covers the major scale in detail, all the ifs, ands, and buts, where tos, and therefores that you will need to know. So we're going to assume you have a pretty good idea of what the C major scale is, so I'm just going to cover what it is in a very minimal fashion. A major scale is it's comprised of notes, obviously 7. And the formula is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So what is a whole step and what is a half step? Well, looking at the guitar, usually I do this kind of stuff on my piano because it's much easier to understand, but we're going to try to keep this to guitar as much as possible for this little series. Looking at the guitar, if we start here on C and we go from 3 to 5, that is a whole step. If we go from 3 to 4, that is a half step or a semitone. If we go from 3 to 5, that is a whole step, 2 half steps, or 2 semitones. So the C major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And that is the C major scale. And it always follows that pattern in the C major scale. It doesn't matter where you started off at. It doesn't matter what C you choose to start off at. It's always that pattern. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And when we're doing these chords, every major scale we do will always follow that particular pattern. And these are one of the rules of music you cannot break. If you're playing in the C major scale, it has to follow this pattern. But you can substitute, and that's a different topic for a different thing. But that is the rule for the C major scale. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So moving on from there. All right, now the C major scale has positions that we can play in. And there's 5 main positions. But you can take these positions and you can put them together to come up with new positions. You don't have to play in these 5. You can take any parts of these scales you want and make your own scales as long as they follow that rule of whole step, half step, whole step, half step. But you can take parts from any scale and turn it into that particular C major scale that you want to play at the time. So let's go ahead and cover what the 5 positions are, and then we'll move on from there. All right, now like I said, all these will follow the major scale, but these will not always start at the root. You can't start all the positions always on the root note. I mean, you could, but you'd be starting on different strings, which is absolutely fine, and I'll show what I'm talking about. If we're playing the C major scale here, all right, now this one does happen to start on C major. And we can start it here on this C major. But we could also start it, for all intents and purposes, we can start it right here. As long as the notes are in that scale, it doesn't really matter where we start, it's still going to be the C major scale. Now, I'm not going to get into modes on this because realistically, we could say, well, if this is C, and we start here on D, and we make that our tonal center, well, now we're playing the Dorian scale. And that is true. We would be playing the Dorian scale of C major, but that is not the intent of this video. That's a whole different thing that we'll get into somewhere down the road. But you can start your scales on any particular note you want. You don't always have to start on the root note. So the way it is comprised of is you have your root note, which is your C. You have a major second, a major third, a perfect fourth, a perfect fifth, a major sixth, a major seventh, and then you have your root, back to your root. Now this can get a little confusing at times because, for instance, when we talk about the relative minor of the scale, we're talking, if we move up from C and we go up 6 intervals, and again, and I know I say this on almost every video, if you haven't watched my video on intervals, you need to watch my video on intervals. Intervals are everything in this world of music. And I'm going to get into a little more detail on that. It's going to be actually a music piano lesson. I'll get into more detail on that, on why intervals are so important. But, and I want to clarify this real quick before somebody says, well, hang on now. The 6th degree is minor, so why is it a major 6? Because it's a major 6 because it is a major degree from the root, from C. It is not per se the major chord. The A by itself is not minor. The A is major. But if we take the 6th chord, then it becomes minor. And that can get very confusing very fast. And what I recommend is to not put a lot of thought into it. Okay, now why is that minor if it's a major 6? This is just how it is, literally. The 6th degree is a major 6th degree of the root. But the 6th chord is a minor chord in a major scale. And honestly, that's all the thought you really need to put into it. I wouldn't waste any more time than that because when I learned this years ago, that just baffled me for like a week. I'm like, what the hell? This doesn't make sense to me. And then I finally, worked my way through it. I had to get my non-functioning man brain moving forward. So, all right. Now that we have that out of the way, what we're going to do is we're going to start on the positions of the C scale. And we're going to start with the first position. All right, so starting here, we're going to start on the 7th fret. And yes, this is a B. Our root is here, but we're covering the scale from 6 to 6, from the 6th string to the 1st string. So starting here on 7, on the 6th and 5th string, the pattern is the same. It's going to be 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 10, 7, 8, 10. Then we get to the 4th string. Then we're going to be 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10. Now right here, we're going to be 8, 10. Then on the 1st string, we're going to be 7, 8, 10. So once again, and you can see the pattern. And you can also see the fingering I have on the pattern. And of course, all this will be downloadable off of my Patreon page. And you can go there and you can get all the backing tracks that we're going to have on this. And you can get all the charts for the scales and the chords, everything you need to understand what is going on here and what we're doing. So that is the first position of the C major scale. So now we're going to move on to the second position of the C major scale. All right, for the second position, we're going to start up here at 10. And on the 6th string, we're going to go 10, 12, 13. Right here on the A string, we're going to go 10, 12. We're going to shift down a half step, and we're going to go 9, 10, 12. 9, 10, 12. We're going to shift back up a half step on the 2nd string, and we're going to go 10, 12, 13. 10, 12, 13. And of course, there is a chart on my Patreon page that hopefully you've downloaded and you're following along with, and it'll also show you the fingering since we have these shifts in here. So this is my second favorite position of the C major scale, or of any major scale. I primarily use 2 positions, and I kind of move things around inside those 2 positions. And this is the one that I favor mostly, besides the one I'll show you here in a minute, which is going to be a combination of the 2 scales together. So this one here is going to start on the 12, and it's going to go 12, 13, 15. Then it's going to go 12, 14, 15. 12, 14, 15. And then when we get here to the 3rd string, it's going to be 12, 14. Then we're going to do 12, 13, 15. 12, 13, 15. And this one's, I really like this one for the obvious reason. The first one is everything here, it's kind of very pentatonic scale filling because we always have our starting note is in the same fret. And like I said, it's kind of, we have our little 12, 13, 15, but then we have their 2 repeatings of the 12, 14, 15, which I really dig. Then we have our 12, 14, but then we have our 12, 13, 15, which repeats, which I really dig also. And I've talked about this pattern multiple times. And this is just a great pattern because it's very simple. It encompasses all the notes you need, and it's very easy to play. And you can just kind of fly across this little pattern here, and I'll expand upon that more towards the end of the video. So this is another one of my favorite patterns to play because to me it's one of the easiest ones to play in for the C major scale. And of the 5 positions, I use a hybrid of 2 positions plus this one here. These are the ones that I use mostly. But let's go ahead and get these scales knocked out, so let's move on. All right, now in the 4th position, this one's a good scale, but it starts off kind of odd if you're playing the whole thing. This one's going to start off on the 6th string at the 13th fret, and we have these 2 whole note passages to start right out of the gate. Now the proper fingering for this would be 1, 2, 4, but it's very hard for me to play a 1, 2, 4 up here because it's so short. Unless I really turn the guitar like this, then it's much easier. But what I do, even though the proper fingering is 1, 2, 4, I will do a 1, 2, 3 here. So on the 6th string, we have 13, 15, 17. Then we got this little shift. And then we're going to have 14, 15, 17. 14, 15, 17. Then we're going to have 14, 16, 17. We're going to shift 14, 16, 17. And then here, we're just going to end it with 2 notes on the low E string, which is going to be 15, 17. Then we have this 3 at the end. And this one I really don't use. I never use this top part here on this scale. I never use it. I will just come in from here and just play from there. This part I never use. It's just too hard for me. I got little hands, man. So in the 5th position, we're going to start here on 17. On the 6th string, we're going to go 17, 19, 20. 17, 19, 20. And here we're going to go 17, 19. We're going to shift back and we're going to do 16, 17, 19. We're going to shift back up and we're going to do 17, 18, 20. Now we're going to do on the 1st string, we're going to go 17, 19, 20. Now the correct fingering up here would be 19, 20, 21. But it's just too small again. So therefore, I use these three fingers, and I do it this way with 1, 2, and 3. And those are the 5 positions of the C major scale. Now what I've done is on my Patreon page is I have a little exercise that moves up and down. I've got the little exercises on my Patreon page in tablature for you to follow along. And then of course I have the fingering. And like I said, now when you get up here, you will probably have to adjust your fingering depending on how your fingers are. Now, I got little hands, so it's different for me. I've got the fingering and of course the entire scale from 6 to 6. The position that you play in and the fingering. All that is downloadable on my Patreon page. So before we move on to the chords, please subscribe to my channel. It costs you nothing to subscribe. It is absolutely free and it really helps my channel out a lot. All of these tabs and the backing tracks we're getting ready to run through are downloadable on my Patreon page. You can join my Patreon page for $1 a month, and it gives you access to pretty much almost everything that I make. Also, I have a TikTok. After a year of my wife beating my ass about not having a TikTok, because I gotta admit, I'm a little anti-TikTok for a multitude of reasons that I'm not going to get into. But I finally went ahead and did a TikTok. So please check out my TikTok and subscribe. What I'm going to be doing on the front end is just cutting up old videos and sticking them on there just so I can get a lot of content up very fast before I start making TikTok specific videos. All right, now before we get into the chords, remember what I said, you can take these scales and you can combine them to make different scales. Well, what I like doing is combining the scales to come up with my own patterns that I'm most comfortable with. Some of these patterns are just very awkward. I'll never use them, so therefore I don't use them. But if you take them and you stick them together, if you take part of, let's say, 1 and part of 2, or part of 2 and part of 3, or 3 and 4, then you can come up with other patterns that you actually might be easier for to use. Now, one of the patterns that I use mostly is, I believe it's 1 and 2. If you take the back half of 1 and the front half of 2, and this is probably one you're more familiar with, which is actually this pattern here. And this is one of my favorite patterns. Remember I said I have 2 patterns that I really, really like? This is one of them because it's very easy and it's very repeatable. I love repeating patterns. And the nice thing about this particular pattern, if you do it here on C and you run through, it does not end on C when you end on the 6th string. But if you start on the 5th string and we go start at C on the 5th string and we run the same pattern, it actually ends up on C 2 octaves up. So if we start here on 5 and we go, on 3, we go 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 4, 5, 7. When we get to 5, that is our first octave of C. And if we continue on and we go 4, 5, 7, now we have a shift here, and now we go 5, 6, 8, and then here we go 5, 7, 8. It ends on C again. So usually on my major scales, like I said, I've taken part of 1, part of 2, put them together. And like I said, this is the one you're probably more familiar with anyway, which gives us that pattern. But then when I play that pattern in particular, if I'm just going to make a very fast run through that pattern, I will always start it on the 5th string. Because if I start it here on D, it ends on D. If I start it here on E, it ends on E. And I like that because I can start on my tonic, and I can end on my tonic. So I always start those scales on the 5th string. And then another thing you have to remember real quick on these scales is the scale's the same no matter where you start it from. You don't have to start it from the 6th string or the 5th string. If you start whatever note you start on in that scale and you repeat the pattern, it's always going to be the same. So if I start here and I run this up and then I bring it to here, and I start it here and I run the same pattern, it's always going to be the same. And that's pretty nice when you're doing repeating patterns, because when we get up here to this one, to this pattern up here, which I told you was my other favorite pattern. The reason I like this, because this is very comfortable for us to do with the 1, 2, and the 4, 2, and 1 finger. That's an easy thing for us to run through. Well, if we take this, let me move this down here. Make sure that everything is still recording. If we take this pattern here, and then we slide down a whole step, slide down, and we can keep repeating that same pattern all the way through, which gives us something really cool, something that we can move through very fast. And it's the same no matter how we do it. And that's going to be, the whole thing is still in the key of C. And it's just a very easy run, especially if you want to do something like that legato. And you can just do it in the groups of 6, or you can make the slide. Then you can just move through it in a blazing pace. Then you could just, and you can just move through it at a blazing pace. And then you just, throw some distortion on it, some delay, and just have a blast with it. All right, so now we're going to move on to chords. Now, there's a couple things we're going to do here real quick. First thing we're going to do is we're going to run through the chords. And again, I have these chords up on my Patreon page. And we're going to start, obviously, with C, the root chord. Now, C, we're going to finger this. We're going to do most of this in open chords. We're not going to get into all the different chord shapes because we'd be here for 3 days doing that particular thing. Now, the C chord is made of C, E, and G. Now, here again, even though we're going to do these down here, you can play a C chord anywhere. You can get the C, E, and G notes together to make a triad, however you want to do it. As long as it contains those 3 notes and those 3 notes only, it is a C chord. So you can devise that anywhere you want. So here's a C, and this is the one we're going to learn, and this is the position I have up on my Patreon page. But we could make a C chord right here. That is also a C chord. That is a triad. That is also a C chord because we have a root, a major third, and our 5th. But when we play these other ones in, all of these notes now out of these 5 strings are all roots, thirds, and 5ths, or C's, G's, and E's. C's, E's, and G's, if you want to keep it root, third, 5th. All these 5 are C's, E's, and G's. And that's what makes a C chord. So the way we're going to do it for this example, though, like I said, you can find any combination of those notes and make a C chord. It doesn't matter which one's on top, which one's on bottom. They're just called inversions at that point. So to give you a quick example, if we play an E here, a C here, well, I could also play a C right here. And this would be an inversion because I've got my 3rd on top. Here's my 5th. And then here is my root. Now it's on the bottom. This would be an inversion of a C. This would be root position, inversion. As long as it's those 3 notes, it doesn't matter. All right, so for the C, we're going to actually do it right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our finger on the 3rd fret, 5th string, 2nd fret, 4th string. Our 3rd string is open. On the 1st fret, 2nd string, and then our 1st string is open. And we strum, and that is a C chord. Now moving on to D. Now the D chord is D, F, and A. Now this is actually a D minor. In the key of C, the 2nd degree is the 2nd chord is a minor chord. So we have a D minor. So what we do is we have our 4th string is open. And here we have on our 2nd string, a 3rd string, we're in the 2nd fret, 2nd string, 3rd fret, and we're in the 1st fret, 1st string. And this is a D minor. And we strum from 1 to 4. And as long as you make up those 3 notes it doesn't matter how you make them, it is still a D minor. Okay, now we're going to go to E minor. Now, an E minor is really easy to play. You're obviously probably familiar with this. And I know some of this is going to seem very arbitrary to a lot of people. Well, how do you know all this stuff? Well, you know all this stuff, but as we keep going into the chords and we start doing the key of C sharp major, there's probably chords in here you don't know. So I'm going to start at the beginning and move all the way through. So E minor is very, very easy to play. All we have to do is put these two fingers, any two fingers you want to use, it doesn't really matter. We're going to be in the 2nd fret and you're barring off string 4 and 5, and everything else is open. And that makes an E minor. Well, what are the notes of an E minor? Well, we have E is going to be our root, E, F, G, A, B, E, G, B. So as long as all these notes make E, G, B, we're playing an E minor. Now we're going to go on to F major. Now F major, this one's a little difficult because this is really going to bring us into bar chords. And if you're new, this one's actually going to be kind of hard. So I'll show you an alternate way to play in F major. So for this purpose though, all of these notes have to be F, A, and C. Our root is F, our 3rd is A, and our 5th is C. So all these notes are F, A, and C, and that's why we fret chords this way, because we have to make them into those 3 notes. If we want to use 6 strings, we have to get all 6 strings to be those 3 notes, and that's how we come up with the positions we play in chords. So in this one, what we're going to do is we're going to bar off on the 1st fret from 1 to 6. Our 3rd finger is going to be 3, 3rd fret, 5th string. Our 4th finger is going to be 3rd fret, 4th string. Our 2nd finger is going to be 2nd fret, 3rd string. Then, of course, we have 1 and 2 barred off by our 1st finger, and we strum all. That is an F major. Now, we do not have to play it this way. We can actually play an F major like this, because it's a little easier for beginners. We bar off 1 and 2 on the 1st fret. Then we go to the second fret, 3rd string, and then we go to the 4th string, 3rd fret. That is also an F major. So whichever way, without hitting the A. Well, actually, that would be an F major with an A, an F/A is what that would be. So whichever way is easier for you to do, but regardless, you're going to have to start getting these bar chords down, so you might as well start practicing it this way. So that is an F major. So moving from F major, now we come over to G. And there again, I've seen people do it this way, and I've seen people do it this way. I cannot do it. It's very odd for me. I've seen people do it this way also. I see a lot of people do it this way. I do it this way. It's just how I learned. So there again, on a G, we got to make all the notes the chord of G. So we have G, A, B, C, D. So we have G, B, and D. So how we do this is we're going to take this finger. We're going to do it the way that I do it. You can, whatever finger you want to use, just make sure the notes are the same. 1st string, 3rd fret. 2nd string, 3rd string, and 4th string are open. We're going to take our 1st finger in the 2nd fret, 5th string, and we're going to reach up with this finger, our 2nd finger, and it's going to go up here on the 6th string, 3rd fret. Now, like I said, I have seen people do it this way. It doesn't matter. The chord is exactly the same, and that is a G major chord. All right, now we're going to move to the A minor, and everybody's probably, A minor and C is probably the first chords that you learn. I wonder how this sounds. I'm actually using one of my acoustic patches on my fractal. I have no idea how it really sounds on there. I've never used it before. So on an A minor, there again, we have an A, it's our A minor chord. So all the notes have to be A, B, C, D, E, A, C, E. So we got to make all these notes A, C, E. So if we start here, we're going to leave the E open, string 1, string 2, 1st fret, string 3 and 4 are going to be in the 2nd fret, and then we leave the A open. Now we strum it from 5 to 1, even though realistically, since our E is our 5th, we could strum it the entire thing and just put the fifth on the top. But it is going to make it E heavy when we do that. You can really hear that E. And we could also grab this C up here if we chose to do so. And play it this way and put the C on top. We can strum the entire thing like this. As long as all these notes equal A, C, and E, it doesn't matter. It's still an A minor chord. Okay, now we're moving on to B diminished. Now these are those chords. I even know seasoned guitar players, and I'm not saying professional, but guys who've been playing for a long time. And I can walk up and say, play a B diminished, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Because in rock music, the diminished chord is not really used a lot, but it's used heavily in blues and in jazz. And it's just a chord that you should get familiar with, playing the diminished chord. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this, a B diminished, and it works on the same principle. We have B, C, D, E, F. So realistically what it is a root with a flatted third and a flatted fifth is a diminished chord. So if we take our root, and then we're going to, this one's a little harder to fret like this. So what we've got, here's a diminished chord. And what we have here is we got our E's open, one's open. We're going to use our third finger and put it in a second fret, third fret, second string. We're going to use our fourth finger, and it's going to go in a third string, fourth fret. We're going to use our third finger, and it's going to go in the third fret on the fourth string. Then we're going to use our index finger, 1, and it's going to go on the fifth string, first fret. And this is a diminished. That is a B diminished. And it is a very hard fingering to grab it like this. So what I normally do if I'm playing a diminished chord, I will skip this fill altogether and just play the triad. Just like a D shape. And just move it up a fret and up a string. And now you have a B diminished. And a lot of times what I do, instead of playing a B diminished, I will play a B minor 7 flat 5. That is a chord that I truly favor over the diminished chord, which is this. And what we've done here is if we take this B diminished here, and we're going to take this right here, which is our B. This gives us our diminished. And right now we're going to make this a flat 7, because we're going to take this octave and we're going to move it down to here. And this is going to give us a flat 7. So this is a B minor 7 flat 5, which is a much more pleasing sounding chord, and it works in the diminished slot wonderfully. And the beautiful thing about this is it's got one of the most beautiful transitions in the world. And check this out. If we come up here to the D minor 7 flat 5. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this 7 and we're going to move it down a half step. And this transitions beautifully into the minor 7 chord below it, which in this case would be C minor 7. Listen to this. It's fantastic. And I use this one little riff a lot when I write and play music. And it's just such a beautiful transition down. So what we're doing is we're taking this and we're moving this root down a full step, down a half step, then down another half step. And it's just following that pattern down. I know I sidetracked on that, but I had to do it. So that is a diminished, the B diminished, which is a very good, you can hear the tension in the chord. It's a very nice chord. But like I said, it's also very hard to fret right here in this open position. So I do it this way. And I just play the triad, these 3. So why did we go over that? We already know all that. Well, you probably do. But what I've done is I've made some backing tracks to help you if you don't know the chords, to help you memorize them and to help with your transitions. And I'll show you what I'm talking about right here. Now what I've done is I've set up a backing track that's going to give you an intro, and it's going to move through the scale like this. Check it out. the intro. All right, so what I've done, and granted that's long, that's for you to kind of get in a feel of the chord changes. But what I've done is I've shortened the backing tracks substantially over several of them, because knowing the chords is fantastic. But what I still see a lot of people struggle with, even people who've been playing for a while, is chord transitions. They can transition great to the chords they know, the ones they play all the time, but the ones they don't, not so much. So I've added faster tracks to give you an example of what I'm talking about. Now what I've done, this one we're going to do is a 1 bar, but I also have one slower than this for 2 bar, which means we're going to have to transition in this 1 bar much faster. And that's the 1 bar. So there is one that gives you a little more time, and it is a 2 bar section. So I have a 4 bar, a 2 bar, and a 1 bar, and each one a little faster to help you with your transitions. But when I get to the 1 bar, then I step it up even further into this one. And this one is 170 beats a minute. Let me show you what it sounds like. Now for newbies, this one's going to be moving fast, but if you've been playing for a while, it shouldn't be that hard. And just to make it that much more fun, I took it to 220 beats. And let me show you what that one sounds like. Now this one is a bit faster. That is awesome. And even if you have been playing for a while, it's still fun to do at that tempo. I was going to take it up one more to 280, but then I thought, well, now it's getting really, it's really getting fast, and chances are you're not going to be doing them that quick. But the premise of that is to get you very fluent in your chord changes, because it's not really good playing a song if you're doing this. If you have to think about your setup, the goal is to get you through your setup extremely fast and just move from one chord to the next. So I'm going to wrap it up right there. And on that note, please subscribe to my channel, check out my Patreon page, and check out my TikTok page. Please subscribe to both if you get a chance. And until the next video, like the great C Maj says, if you miss a beat, you lose the rhythm and nothing falls into place. And no matter what you do, for the love of God, rock on.